She anticipated the moment his skin would brush hers. But after a few seconds, when she felt nothing, her eyes fluttered open. He was still at her level, but his cheek was now against hers, his beard grazing her skin lightly, his breath fanning her ear. His body was all around her, yet not quite touching. She felt him smirk against her cheek before he stood upright, grabbed his phone, and disappeared. "If you're done admiring me and don't want to sleep in that gown, go change," he said in an offhand manner. He is so full of himself, she thought. Siana abruptly stood only to stumble again. He caught her in time, forcing her to stand upright. "Damsel in distress," he repeated before leaving. It was the second time he had called her that, and she didn't appreciate it. Grumper. Mr. Grumper. She inwardly fumed. Carefully, Siana moved her foot forward, slowly picking up a random t-shirt and loose pants. She made her way toward the same door he had just emerged from. Her jaw dropped the moment she entered. The bathroom was unusually spacious, a beautiful blend of luxurious materials and natural light. She hurried to change out of her gown before she embarrassed herself further. As she attempted to unzip her dress, she realized how tight it was. She struggled for a while, then paused to comb her hair out of the way. Unfortunately, her hair got caught in the zipper. A painful groan escaped her lips. Why does everything have to happen today? She felt a surge of irritation. With no other choice, she sighed and called the only person who could help. Aldrich, she called as politely as she could. He didn't respond the first time, so she called out again louder. "What?" He barked. I need your assistance," she yelled from behind the bathroom door. "You haven't even been here half an hour, and you've already cheesed me off," he growled as he stormed into the bathroom. Why is he always so angry? She thought. Is there a fire burning inside him? She kept her silence, knowing she needed his help. Arguing with him would lead nowhere. "Would you kindly tell me what assistance you require, princess?" he asked sarcastically. "Zip, my hair," was all she managed to say before his large palm brushed against her back. "Rapunzel," he mocked before yanking the zipper down forcefully. A few strands of her hair tore from her scalp, eliciting a pained yelp. He used to call her that when they were kids because of her long, silky hair. Today, though, the word was laced with resentment and bitterness. "That was harsh," she said, placing her hand over her chest to prevent the gown from slipping down. She waited for him to apologize. "This isn't a love story where I tease you, blow on your back, and give you butterfly kisses. I'm forced into this marriage, so I'm the anti-hero in your story." He spat, turning her around. "I'm forced into this wedding, too. But that doesn't mean we can't at least try talking politely." Siana attempted to reason with him. "This is our wedding night," she began, then bit down on her cheek, realizing how it sounded. In a split second, his eyes darkened, and a flash of lust appeared within them. Siana's breathing sped up. She hadn't meant it the way he was taking it. "You're right. It's our first night. We should make the most of it," he said, his voice lowering ominously, his expression turned indecipherable, sending shivers through her. "Or should we?" He took one intimidating step toward her, and time seemed to stand still. Siana gazed at Aldrich and spoke softly. "You're right. It's our first night, and we should make the most of it." His expression darkened, becoming completely indecipherable and terrifying her to the core. "Or should we?" he added. The moment he took one intimidating step toward her, time seemed to stand still. Siana reflexively stepped back, clutching her gown tightly to her chest to keep herself covered. Matching her speed, he took another step forward, forcing her to step back once again. They continued this silent dance until Siana's nearly bare back collided with the cold bathroom tiles. An uncharacteristic heat surged in the unusually large bathroom, which now seemed suddenly cramped. Aldrich lifted his right hand and her gaze followed it until it came to rest at the side of her head. His left hand mirrored the action, trapping her between his arms. "This is exactly what you wanted," he said, pressing his palms harder against the wall. His voice was stern. "Isn't it?" Siana blinked once, twice, then a third time, still not fully grasping his words. You falling on the stair, whining in pain, getting your hair caught in the zip. None of that was an accident, he continued. You did all of it on purpose to get my attention. He leaned forward slightly, though his body still didn't touch hers. Isn't it? Her pupils dilated and her jaw dropped. No way. Not everyone, Mr. Aldrich Lionol, is the same, she snapped, unable to endure his accusations any longer. Yeah, well, I'm familiar with girls like you, he said. When I came out of the bathroom, I noticed you gawking at me, staring with those lustful eyes. Your eyes were practically screaming your intentions. Humiliation washed over Siana. She took a deep breath, outraged that he would say such a thing. Do you want me to grant your wish? He asked with a smirk. She pressed one hand firmly against his chest to push him away while holding her dress in place with the other. I don't want this, she stated emphatically. I know exactly what your body desires, he murmured, leaning in. He lowered his face near her neck, grazing the curve with a feather-like touch of his nose and inhaling her scent. A strange, unsettling shiver rippled through her, and she briefly forgot to breathe when he blew softly over her exposed skin. What was this man doing to her? He had hardly even touched her, yet her body was already betraying her. But let me tell you one thing, he said, lifting his face until the tip of his nose was almost brushing hers. No matter how beautiful you are, I will never touch you in that way. Aldrich pulled back with lightning speed, his intense gaze never leaving hers. For me, this marriage is simply a business transaction, one that will profit me greatly. The only drawback is having to invest my peace of mind, but that's acceptable because the money I'm getting makes it all worthwhile. Siana blinked. He seemed consumed by wealth, as if it dripped from every part of him. What I said before still stands, he went on. To the outside world, we'll appear to be the perfect couple, but once the doors are closed, we're strangers. You don't deserve any position in my life, let alone that of a wife. He took a step back and leaned against the wall, arms at his sides. It's my misfortune that I'm bound to you for a year. I've never slept with a girl who doesn't have high standards. Her subconscious whispered that he had never loved any of the girls he'd been with. So keep your desires close, he scoffed. Before Siana could respond, Aldrich stepped away. She stomped her foot in frustration and punched the air where he'd been standing only moments before. She wanted to strangle him for those words. How dare he speak that way about her? She hated him. More than that, she loathed her own tongue and brain for going mute whenever he was close. She promised herself she would not let him tear down her self-esteem. He might have money and power, but it didn't give him the right to belittle her. Maybe other people bowed to his behavior, but she refused to let him get away with these insults. Pushing aside her anger, Siana changed out of her wedding gown, freshened up, and put on the dress she had brought alone. Once finished, she walked out of the bathroom. Aldrich was lying on the bed, one arm tucked behind his head, while his other hand scrolled absently on his phone. Siana, exhausted from the day's events, placed her folded gown aside and sat on the bed. What exactly do you think you're doing? He demanded, his voice drawing her attention. I'm guessing you have short-term memory loss. I just told you I don't consider you my wife, so I'm not sharing my bed with you. For the next year, the couch is your bed. Siana's eyes drifted across the room in search of a couch, but she saw none. But there isn't a couch in this room, she muttered. Are you blind as well as dumb? He barked. She shot him a furious glare. He lifted himself onto one elbow and tilted his head toward the corner which had been hidden by her position on the bed. What the? His irritation flared as he finally noticed a couch tucked in the corner. Dad, he pinched the bridge of his nose. I thought the staff was taking that out for renovation, he grumbled under his breath, and Siana stared, remembering that morning's incident, which he had clearly forgotten. Well, there's always the floor, Aldrich scoffed, tossing one of the pillows onto the ground. What a jerk! Siana stood and picked up the pillow. He smirked, seemingly confident he had won some unspoken argument. However, she promptly walked back to the bed, placed the pillow at the headboard, and settled against it, refusing to budge. Aldrich knitted his brows in confusion as she made herself comfortable. I'm not sleeping on the floor, she said. Why not? His brow arched questioningly. Siana flashed him a challenging look. I guess you're the one with short-term memory loss, she remarked. A few minutes ago, you accused me of doing everything in my power to get your attention. Now that a perfect opportunity to share a bed with you has presented itself, why would I throw that away? She smirked. Well, I don't want to share my bed with you, he growled, sitting up. That's your problem, she shot back, flipping her hair. But as you said, the floor is always an option. She lay down on the bed, biting her lower lip to keep from laughing at his furious expression. Her remark had clearly struck a nerve, just as his venomous words had angered her minutes earlier. She no longer cared if he burned with rage. Suddenly, Aldrich grabbed her shoulder, planted his hands on either side of her head, and hovered over her as she began to turn. Are you telling Aldrich Lionol, the Aldrich Lionol, to sleep on the floor? His gaze was sharp enough to pierce her soul. Yes, she replied calmly. By what right? His brow furrowed. Siana responded. The same right you're using to tell me to sleep on the floor. She crossed her arms over her chest to maintain some distance between them. This is my room, he emphasized. And you know I never liked sharing anything that was mine even as a child. For the first time, he brought up their shared childhood. Both of them froze for an instant. Realizing what he had said, his expression hardened, his jaw clenched. Siana knew about his obsession with his possessions. He used to declare, "This is mine. This is mine," as if chanting a tune. That included her as well, once upon a time. But everything had changed. I know this is your room and your bed, she said quietly. But for the next year, it's also mine. He opened his mouth as if to correct her. But she spoke first. No need to remind me this marriage is a game. Just don't forget I'm a human, not a toy. I have basic needs, and one of them is sleeping in a bed. I'm not going to sleep on the floor. Aldrich's eyes shut tightly in frustration. Why are you making this such a big deal? She let out a small huff. Oh, I see. You won't be able to keep your hands to yourself, right? She shoved him away again, holding back a chuckle at his vexed expression. Wrong! He yelled, causing her to flinch. You're nothing compared to the girls I've slept with. You're a huge turnoff. His words stung and the small smile vanished from her lips. As always, he didn't miss a chance to hurt her. Aldrich settled himself on the bed beside her, pulling the duvet around him. Siana turned as well, facing his back and silently drilling imaginary holes into him with her glare. She wasn't a violent person, but whenever he wounded her feelings, a surge of raw anger made her want to lash out. After a few moments, the bed shifted. He had flipped to face her. His eyes were closed, his lips a thin line, and his forehead was creased. His breaths were sharp and loud, as though he were trying and failing to sleep. Siana had no idea how the future would unfold or how this marriage would end. They obviously despised each other. She held no illusions about a fairy tale romance, but part of her still yearned for the Aldrich, the sweet, caring, loving boy she once knew. She doubted it was possible, yet a small piece of her clung to hope. After all, as the saying went, every cloud has a silver lining. Siana suddenly felt anxious, her tongue darting out to moisten her lips. Aldrich's gaze seemed to flicker downward every time, stopping at her mouth. Stop doing this? He said, keeping his eyes firmly on her lips. Stop doing what? She asked in a voice so soft that it barely reached her own ears. Without answering, Aldrich shut his eyes tightly and took a sharp, audible breath. Then he sprang off the bed, putting considerable distance between them as though she were a contagious disease. What was he telling her to stop? Siana wondered, because if she knew, she might do it even more often to annoy him. She exhaled in relief as he moved toward the door, stretching, her t-shirt hiked up slightly, and she noticed she smelled just like him. It was time for a fresh start. After getting ready, Siana made her way downstairs when one of the maids summoned her for breakfast. Only then did she truly absorb the beauty of the mansion. Enormous, modern in style, lavishly furnished with the world's most expensive luxuries, yet lacking the warmth that gave any sense of belonging. She hurried toward the dining area, mindful of Aldrich's father watching her from across the room. The last thing she wanted was to embarrass herself on her first full day there. "Good morning, Uncle," Siana said, flashing a wide smile. She was grateful that at least one person in the house seemed normal. "Please call me Dad," he replied. "I'll feel included." "All right, Dad," she repeated, taking a seat next to Aldrich. "I hope you slept well," Aldrich's father said, sipping his coffee. Before Siana could respond, she felt Aldrich's hand on her thigh, a warning to keep quiet. "Yeah, Dad," he answered sarcastically, throwing a false smile in her direction. "It was one of the best nights ever, wasn't it, wifey?" Siana forced the same fake smile and nodded. With a gesture, Aldrich's father invited her to start eating. She reached for the food, but the moment Aldrich shot her a glare, she pulled her hand back. Quickly, a maid stepped over to serve coffee and breakfast. "Thank you," Siana said, startling the young maid. Aldrich glowered again, silently conveying that they don't thank the help in this household. Siana disregarded it. She believed in gratitude, and the maid had simply done a small task she was capable of doing herself. She shrugged and started eating, and breakfast proceeded in awkward silence, the only noise coming from forks and knives scraping plates. "All right, Dad. I'm off to the office," Aldrich said eventually, wiping his mouth with a napkin. "At least wait until the girl finishes her breakfast," his father suggested. "You can keep her company," Aldrich mumbled dismissively. "Uh-oh, she'll be going with you to the company," his father clarified. "What?" Aldrich shouted at the same moment that Siana nearly choked on her coffee. Her in his business? She had intended to visit Lily and her own father today, not spend an entire day with Aldrich. "Yes," Aldrich's father confirmed with a smile. "You know, Dad," Aldrich began in a measured tone. "Mom is a businesswoman. She's so busy with her work, she has no time for her family. Is that what you want for yourself?" He was clearly trying to maneuver the situation in his favor. But now, Siana remembered something important. Aldrich's mother. She hadn't even been at the wedding. Where was she? "This is precisely what I do not want," Aldrich's father replied, snapping Siana out of her thoughts. "Your mother and I have separate companies, and that has caused disagreements, but your wife will be working with you at your office." Siana's eyes widened. "No," Aldrich protested, starting to rise from his seat. "What?" His father's challenging tone made him sit right back down. "I mean," he tried again. "I already have 3 personal assistants. I don't need another. I've already transferred one of them to my own office," his father said calmly. "Besides, she's your wife. She'll co-manage the business with you." Aldrich opened his mouth to argue, but his father raised a hand to silence him. "Don't worry, I looked at her qualifications and achievements. She has everything she needs to do well in the position." Aldrich released a sharp, annoyed breath. "Are you happy with this arrangement, Sia?" his father asked. Siana glanced at Aldrich, who was skewering a piece of fruit with his fork, while his glare practically skewered her. "Yes, I'm comfortable," she finally replied with a small, uneasy smile, swallowing the word not. Aldrich got up from his chair and headed for the exit. His father nodded towards Siana, urging her to follow. She tried to keep up with Aldrich's brisk pace. "Comfortable with the work, huh?" "We'll see about that," Aldrich muttered just loud enough for her to hear. Adjusting his coat, he strode outside where his driver waited by the open car door. They climbed in, and the ride to his office was tense. Aldrich repeatedly clenched and unclenched his fists, his jaw working furiously as though matching each clench, his eyes filled with barely contained anger. When the car pulled up to its destination, Aldrich exited and walked swiftly ahead without a glance, leaving Siana to hurry behind him. Employees gave polite greetings, which she ignored, and she hurried to keep up. He came to a sudden stop at the elevator, causing her to crash into his back. Aldrich threw her a cutting look before turning his attention on a man standing nearby. The man wore a bright red bow tie. "Is this how you show up for work?" Aldrich snapped. "You're fired." Siana gasped in sync with the newly dismissed employee. The man opened his mouth to plead, but Aldrich raised a hand, shutting him down. He entered the elevator without another word. Poor guy. He was just caught in the crosshairs of Aldrich's fury. With her eyes, Siana tried to convey a silent apology on Aldrich's behalf. Are you joining me or not? Aldrich asked, tapping his shoe impatiently until she stepped in beside him. They reached the 4th floor in no time, and Aldrich opened the door to his office using his fingerprint. Instantly, he transformed into a robotic, hyper-efficient version of himself. Passcodes for laptops, multiple phone calls, and an unyielding focus on spreadsheets and files. When he finally looked up, it was only to assign Siana a towering stack of work. She immersed herself in the tasks, suspecting he was overloading her out of spite. Before she knew it, 5 hours had flown by, and Aldrich hadn't once lifted his eyes from his screen. Siana found herself impressed by how he worked seamlessly with both hands. He was ambidextrous. I need the Zolo Corporation file on my desk in 5 minutes, he announced abruptly. Are you asking me? Siana's brows furrowed. Do you see anyone else here? He replied, voice dripping with sarcasm. She shook her head. Then move, he barked. It's on that back shelf. Be quick. Siana stood and went to the shelf, frowning at the hundreds of papers, folders, and files. How was she supposed to find one specific file here? Steeling herself, she scanned the shelving system. It appeared the file she needed was shoved at the very top, just out of reach. Sighing, she dragged a small stool closer to help her climb up. Rising on her toes, she stretched toward the file. Suddenly, she felt a large hand closing around it from behind, and out of the corner of her eye, she saw Aldrich leaning in, annoyance radiating from him. Good for nothing, he muttered as he yanked the file from the shelf. He pulled so forcefully that the stool slipped away. Siana lost her balance and tumbled backward. By saving her, Aldrich ended up with his face mere inches from hers, his cologne filling her senses. She could feel his breath against her forehead, triggering fresh nerves. Her throat went dry, and her tongue instinctively moistened her lips, drawing his eyes right to them. Her breathing hitched. I told you not to do that this morning, he muttered, his words brushing against her mouth. Siana gulped audibly, resisting the urge to lick her lips again. Instead, she bit down on her lower lip to manage the anxiety. Without warning, Aldrich lifted his right hand from behind her back, placing his fingertips on her cheek and his thumb beneath her chin. Gently, he coaxed her lower lip free of her teeth. She could feel the soft throb where she had bitten down so hard. A dark intensity flickered across his face when he finally saw the reddened lip. His thumb slid upward, drawing blood to her cheeks. Then he paused, hovering just a fraction of an inch from her mouth. Siana thought he might retreat, but instead his thumb settled on her lip, sending a jolt of electricity straight through her core. To her surprise, she realized how new and how thrilling this sensation was. As if that weren't enough to kindle a fire within her, he began lightly stroking the plump, slightly numb area, tracing slow lines from one corner of her mouth to the other. He stopped over the spot where she had bitten down, massaging in small circles and soothing the pain. The touch felt so comforting that Siana's eyes slipped shut of their own accord. A soft, involuntary moan escaped her, and her eyes flew open in embarrassment. Aldrich stared back, gazing at her like a predator, poised to devour its prey. She wanted to push him away, but her mind seemed to short-circuit. The pleasure of his touch awakened unknown desires that rooted her to the spot. Gradually, his thumb slid aside, and Aldrich lowered his face, closing the distance between their lips. Every millimeter sending her heartbeat into a frenzied sprint. Just then, someone knocked on the office door. Aldrich drew away in an instant, releasing her waist as though nothing had happened. Siana dropped onto her backside with a painful thump, groaning in discomfort. He looked perfectly composed while she felt winded as if she had just sprinted a marathon. Siana would have lashed out at him for letting her fall, but the voice beyond the door grabbed her attention, making her forget everything else. Something about it gave her a sense of foreboding. It did not sound like good news. A feminine voice sounded behind Aldrich Lionol's office door. Lion, the newcomer called, entering without so much as a knock. Hello, my Delia, darling. Aldrich greeted, stepping toward her with open arms. "How are you?" Judging by the way he spoke to her, polite rather than rude or dismissive, one could tell this visitor meant something to him. He certainly did not speak this kindly to Siana or most others. Overwhelmed, the girl said. "What happened?" he asked, concern in his tone. "You're really going to stand there and ask me what happened?" she retorted, folding her arms over her chest. "Are you serious, Aldrich?" Oblivious to Siana's presence, the stranger looked consumed by her own frustrations. Aldrich sighed. "You're calling me Aldrich, which means this is very serious." He gestured to one of the chairs. "Have a seat so we can talk." "I'm not here to sit," Delia practically shouted. Siana noticed that at just 2 words from Aldrich telling her to lower her voice, Delia seemed to deflate, her body relaxed, and her eyes lost some of their anger. It appeared no one could truly stay mad at Aldrich for long. He held a unique power over others. "How can I calm down when I just found out you've married?" she asked quietly, clearly chastened by Aldrich's warning. He kept his own voice level. "We can talk it through. There's no need to panic." Siana watched silently. The god of anger himself was advising someone else to remain calm. She fought the urge to roll her eyes. "I'm completely clueless," Delia said. "I just want to know who the girl is, the one you left me for." Aldrich shifted slightly, giving Dia a clear line of sight. Her gaze darted from his face to Siana's. At that point, Siana realized she was still sitting on the floor, having fallen moments earlier. So engrossed in their exchange, she had momentarily forgotten she was on the ground. She quickly scrambled to her feet, dusting off her hands. Dia, that was the girl's name, approached with measured steps, her eyes narrowed. Tall and striking, Delia circled Siana as though inspecting a newly delivered package. "Are you serious?" Delia finally said, "When did you start liking such stereotypical girls? You ditched me for her?" Her tone dripped with derision. The sudden reminder of lunch was clearly just his way of dismissing her. Siana bristled, but she bit back any response. "Thank you so much for being so considerate," she said with a sarcastic edge before walking to the door, fully aware that Delia and Aldrich wanted her gone. They looked like a couple, but if so, it was a relationship without genuine love. Siana sensed zero genuine warmth between them. Still, why should she care? With a shrug, she turned on her heel only to bang straight into someone standing in the doorway. She stumbled and landed on the floor again. Why is everything going wrong today? Rubbing her brow and nose, she blinked up at a man who looked vaguely familiar. He was scanning her from head to toe. Siana tried to recall where she'd seen him before. When he bowed, offered her his hand, and spoke her name, she finally remembered. As soon as Siana left, Aldrich locked the cabin door so no one could disturb him. Turning to Delia, he motioned for her to sit down. "Let's talk like 2 adults," he said, easing himself into his own chair. He patted his lap, but she ignored the invitation, crossing her arms and staring him down. The audacity, he thought. Still, her attitude hardly bothered him enough to send her away. He had his own reasons for keeping Dia close. "Dia," he began in a chiding tone. "What's the issue? Why are you so upset? We've been together for 3 years, so why this overreaction to a mere rumor?" "You married someone," she fired back without telling me. "How can I stay calm?" Aldrich leaned back in his chair, exhaling. "I haven't really married her." "What?" "I mean, I did marry her, but it's not what you think," he said quickly. "Explain yourself," she demanded, taking a step forward. "Not until you sit," he insisted. After a moment, Dia sank into the seat opposite him, though clearly reluctant. "All right." Aldrich's gaze turned calculating. "It's a business contract for me. I'm in a 1-year contract marriage with that girl." "Why?" Delia asked, cutting him off. He hated being interrupted. It tested his patience. Still, he forced himself to remain calm. "Because my father made me do it. He threatened to donate his entire company to charity if I didn't follow his demands." So, I'm using this girl as a stepping stone. Once I get what I want, I'll throw her out of my life. Delia frowned. But why would your father push you into marrying some nerd? Her face was etched with genuine confusion. That's not important. Aldrich growled, his lip twitching in irritation. What if you fall? He cut her off. I won't fall in love with her. She's not my type. Besides, I only enter deals that profit me. That girl doesn't have a dime. He reached out and spun the small decorative globe on his desk. Delia looked unconvinced. What if she's your soulmate? She ventured, biting her lip. She seemed near tears. How many times do I have to tell you? Stop watching those ridiculous dramas, he said sharply. I don't believe in soulmates. That garbage only exists in romance novels. She opened her mouth to speak again, but Aldrich interrupted. And if there is such a thing as a soulmate, then for me it's you. He added a honeyed smile. Delia's tense posture softened as he continued. I'm going to build a castle for my queen after this 1-year contract is over. Once I get my father's money, she stood, her face brightening. You mean me? Am I your queen? He raised an eyebrow. Do you doubt me? Her lower lip trembled as she admitted. I was afraid you were ditching me. He shook his head. How could I? You know I don't look at other women that way. Only you, my darling. Delia's lips curled into a broad smile, her white teeth showing through layers of dark red lipstick. She had no idea what Aldrich did most nights at clubs and hotels. She believed he was a one-woman man devoted entirely to her. But in truth, Aldrich Lionol could never be satisfied by a single partner. He thrived on luxury and sexual indulgence, two things he believed he couldn't live without. Can I have my reward now that you know I'm still yours? He asked, rubbing his thigh meaningfully and beckoning for Delia to join him. She smirked and walked over, sinking onto his lap so that she was straddling him. Aldrich slid his hands along her sides, fingers creeping into her hair as he pulled her close for a kiss. He tasted her lipstick, and a wave of desire flowed through his veins. Money and women were his two greatest obsessions. He pressed his mouth to her neck, nibbling and sucking at her soft skin. Delia tilted her head to the side and practiced submission, offering him full access. She had learned precisely how to please him over the years. No explanations necessary. Aldrich adored dominating women in bed. Seeing them tremble beneath him thrilled him. He found a certain excitement in their vulnerability, and he always chose willing partners who craved his brand of overpowering desire. Recently, something about Siana's reactions had stoked Aldrich's inner beast. The way she trembled under his gaze, the way her mind went blank whenever he moved close. She would be the ideal candidate for his bed, if only she wasn't so inconveniently linked to his father's plan. Even the simple act of her moistening her lips inflamed him. Then again, perhaps it was just that he hadn't been with anyone in a week, ever since his father forced this marriage upon him. A week without sex was like a day without food or water for Aldrich Lionol. Delia let out a low moan as he traced the curves of her body. Aldrich, she whispered. He murmured, too absorbed in pleasure to form words. You forgot one thing, she said, pushing him back slightly. He opened his eyes, frowning. What? My special day, Delia reminded him, sounding mildly hurt. Aldrich paused for a moment, then remembered her birthday was next week. How could I forget? Yes, your birthday. In truth, it had completely slipped his mind. So why haven't I received any early gifts? You always shower me with them a month before? She asked, arching an eyebrow expectantly. He gave a cajoling shrug. Things have been chaotic lately. Sorry for the delay. She didn't look totally placated. All right, he said. I'll buy you a diamond necklace and ring to make up for it. A tentative smile spread over her face. Will that do? She practically bounced on his lap in excitement. Yes. Aldrich inhaled as a jolt of lust shot through him. I made you happy. Now it's your turn to make me happy, he said with a wicked grin. Catching the meaning in his words, Dalia slipped off his lap and knelt on the floor before him, exactly where he wanted her. Aldrich stroked her hair in approval, and her nimble hands went to work on his trousers. He tilted his head back, letting the wave of pleasure wash away any coherent thought. At last, the release he'd been craving for days, a moment of pure indulgence free from his father's schemes, and the bothersome contract marriage looming over him. Siana shrugged her shoulders, allowing the couple their privacy. She turned on her heels only to collide with what she assumed was a pillar until she landed on the floor once again. Why is everything good happening to me today? She thought in exasperation. Rubbing her brow and nose, Siana looked up to see a man, not a pillar, staring down at her. While she tried to place his face, he regarded her from head to toe, as though examining something. He looks familiar, but I can't quite place him. He's somewhere in the back of my mind. But where? Having trouble recognizing me? He asked, kneeling down to her level. He extended his hand to help her up, adding, Rapunzel. Realization finally dawned on her. Pitter-patter. Her face lit up and she took his hand, using his support to stand. Thank God, he teased. I thought you'd forgotten about me. No, it's just been 14 years. You look completely different, so you know. Siana straightened her stance and took a small step back, putting a bit of distance between them. Yeah, I know. I've grown into a dashing man, he replied with a grin. Siana laughed. He truly hadn't changed at all. Ever since childhood, he had loved to toot his own horn. Don't laugh, he pouted, and she instantly stifled her laughter. By the way, you've grown into a lovely lady, he added. Thank you, she said, smiling politely. I want my huggy, he whimpered like a child, extending his arms for a bear hug. Siana obliged, hugging him in a friendly manner, wrapping her arms around his neck. You still have the height and weight of that 10-year-old girl I left behind. He teased, prompting her to narrow her eyes. Shut up, Peter, she snapped, ready to retaliate if he said anything else about her height or weight. Okay, boss lady, he said, lifting his hands in surrender. I'm sorry. It's all right, she sighed, offering a small smile. By the way, what are you doing here? I just came to see Aldrich, he explained. You two are still friends, she asked. My bad luck, he muttered, scrunching his nose. Ha ha. But you can't meet him right now, Siana informed him. How come? Peter's brow furrowed. Because he's very busy, she explained. But it's lunchtime, Peter pointed out. Yes, but he asked me not to bother him because he's with his girlfriend. Delia. Yes. Siana tried to recall. I believe that's what he called her. That Peter spat, clearly enraged. He asked you to leave him alone with his bimbo and you just walked out. He sounded incredulous. Yes. She shrugged. Siana. God, you're still so innocent. Aldrich is your husband now. How can you leave him alone in the same room with another girl? His words jolted her memory. Oh, right. He's my husband. At least in the eyes of the world. How could I forget? You're right. She agreed with a nod. I should go in. Siana turned on her heels, intent on returning to Aldrich's office, only to be pulled back by a sudden grip around her waist. You're not going anywhere, Peter murmured behind her. I don't want your innocent heart destroyed by whatever's happening behind that closed door. What do you mean? She asked, eyebrows knitting together as she freed herself from his hold and stepped to face him. Forget about him. Come with me. I'm hungry. Let's grab something to eat first. Without allowing her to protest, Peter led her to the elevator, which took them to the cafeteria. What do you want? He asked once they arrived. Anything is fine, Siana said with a shrug. Peter went to fetch some food while she sat patiently waiting. He returned a few moments later with 2 coffees and 2 sandwiches. Thank you, she said, smiling warmly. Pleasure is all mine, he replied, grinning in return. Siana took a sip of her hot coffee before biting into her sandwich, waiting for Peter to break the silence. By the way, he began between bites of his own sandwich. You didn't feel guilty about ditching me? Ditching you? She frowned, confused. What are you talking about? Yes, indeed. Remember when we were kids? You were my girlfriend? He clarified, waggling his eyebrows mischievously. Rolling her eyes, Siana corrected him. Peter, I was your girlfriend, not your girlfriend. Whatever. I was dead serious about you, he said, pouting once again. Shaking her head, she decided to ignore his over-the-top dramatics and focused on finishing her food. Peter was still as childlike as ever. So, how's your marriage going? He asked, catching her off guard. She nearly choked on her sandwich. Very well, Siana managed to say after swallowing. Peter chuckled at her less than enthusiastic response. I can hear the sarcasm dripping off those words. Ha! There's no need to pretend in front of me.